Do you recognize this behavior? So you keep quiet when you want to speak, or you apologize for things that aren't your fault. You might say yes when your whole body is screaming no, and you kind of edit yourself in case someone withdraws their affection, or worse, turns their back on you completely. So, this is what I want to talk about today. For many of us, I don't think this came out of bloody nowhere. It was written into us as kids. So love was not always necessarily steady or unconditional, because it was only offered when we behaved or performed or achieved, or if we pleased someone. And if we didn't, it was withheld. And sometimes it could be subtle, like maybe a cold silence or like a look of disappointment. And other times it was really bloody loud and humiliating. Either way, we learned really, really quickly that approval was our survival. So let's just have a look at the childhood roots. As children, I believe we arrive whole, and we don't know how to perform, or we don't know how to calculate what will make us loved. We just simply are. But very early, many of us sadly discover that this pure expression of self isn't always welcomed, and that's by parents, maybe teachers, or extended family members. And shame is often used as a way to control behavior, and sometimes it was really explicit for some of us. You should be ashamed of yourself, that sort of thing. And other times it was kind of more subtle, but it can cut just as deep. It could be like an eyebrow raise, or with the withdrawal of affection, or the sudden shift in tone. And it could be like a dramatic when you ask for something they didn't want to give, or you could have got the stony silence when you expressed anger or sadness. And that some of us were shamed when we express sadness via our tears, like stop crying and you won't get your way like that. Then the mocking or laughter when you dare to try something new, or cutting phrases many of us recognize in our heads, like, how dare you disrespect me? We all know that. And don't you embarrass me. Who do you think you are? Do any of these sound familiar? So the irony is, most of us at the time weren't doing anything wrong. A child's outburst or defiance, it's not an attack, it's a communication. But the ego of the unhealed parent is so very fragile that they see the child's behavior as like a personal insult, rather than a byproduct of an unmet need or fear, or frustration inside them. Instead of attuning, they demand obedience. And instead of being curious with the child, they reach for control. And shame became like the lever they were pulling. And it was a tool to bend the child into compliance, to keep their own emotional safety and authority intact. And for the kid who depends on the adult for survival, it will, of course, work. So that means to the child, love became conditional, and it was safe to be praised when we achieved or when we smiled on cue. But if we did what was expected. But when we were, I don't know, messy or angry or wild or simply just being ourselves, the warmth kind of disappeared. And what the child needs most is attachment. So when faced with a choice between authenticity and belonging, the child will always sacrifice authenticity every single time. And this is how shame first takes root. It's a way of being in the world. So let's look at the survival strategy here. For a child, survival depends on keeping the bond with their caregiver intact. So no matter how unjust the situation feels, the attachment must be preserved. And so the child learns quickly, if fully being myself risks rejection, then I'm not going to be fully myself. I think that's a no-brainer. And this is where the performance begins. We smile when we don't feel like smiling, and we apologise if we've done nothing wrong, or we swallow our anger because it's not palatable and it feels emotionally dangerous. We achieve and we please and overfunction because that keeps us safe. That's the script anyway. It's really important to see that this isn't conscious. A 6-year-old is never sitting there weighing up their options on a conscious level. The nervous system makes the choice for them. Belonging at all cost. Authenticity is pushed down, hidden, or it's kind of reshaped into something more acceptable. And when this repeats again and again, the child no longer remembers the difference between who they are and who they had to be. So that means shame becomes like this silent guardian of this arrangement. And every time the true self starts to rise, shame pushes it down, and it kind of whispers, don't speak, don't try, don't show yourself, you'll lose everything. And then you've got shame in adult life. So what starts as a survival strategy in childhood, it doesn't just stay there, it comes with us and shaping the way we work, we relate, and the way we love. And shame shows up when we hesitate to speak our truth in a meeting, or when we replay conversations in our head and we've convinced we sound stupid, or we feel guilty for resting instead of producing, and it fuels this perfectionism and people pleasing, overachieving, and the constant scanning of other people's reactions. So in relationships, it often looks like kind of shrinking ourselves to avoid that rejection, or clinging too tightly for fear of abandonment. And it also keeps us apologizing for just existing and hiding our vulnerability, or over functioning just to feel worthy. And shame doesn't just live here in the mind, it literally lodges itself in the body as chronic tension and illness or exhaustion. And look, here's the part that I think quite a lot of people miss. If you're a parent reading this and you recognize shaming patterns in your own parenting, the first thing you're going to do is shame yourself. And you might think, I've damaged my child, I'm no better than what I went through. Do you see the cycle? It's shame feeding on shame, generation after generation. But this is also where the pattern can end. The moment you notice it, you're no longer unconsciously repeating it. And by catching it in the act, by meeting it with compassion instead of like condemnation, you're going to interrupt the cycle. And yourself, that you'll understand that mistakes don't have to equal disconnection, and love is not conditional. We might have heard it from our parents, I love you unconditionally, but that's not what our nervous system learned. But you can also know that repair is possible. And there is a cost to shame. The hardest part about shame, I think, is that it doesn't just stop us from doing something, it stops us from being someone, and it chips away at the core of who we are. And it's teaching us that, love is earned and it's never inherent, and the cost of carrying that belief is enormous. Many of us grew up in homes where academic performance was tied to worth. Parents often terrified that their child might fail in life, and poured that fear into school reports and grades and university places. And at first glance, of course, it looks like encouragement, but underneath, it looks to me like there's a deep cycle of shame. And the child receives the message, you're loved when you succeed and you are less when you don't. So instead of expanding naturally into their own gifts, that child will learn to shrink themselves into whatever will preserve that attachment. And they stay inside this box of expectation, even if it suffocates them. And so many of those high achievers, like, your doctors, lawyers, academics, and the ones who seem to have it all, they arrive in my space when they come and see me here burnt out, and they almost feel hollow by the time they're 30. And when I ask them what their values are, what really matters to you, they often recite values that don't even belong to them. They're values of their parents or their teachers or society values, and their own identity has been shrouded in layers of inauthentic behaviour because being themselves was never safe, and fear was the atmosphere of their childhood, and shame became the air they breathed. And this, I believe, is the true cost of shame. It robs us of our authenticity, our freedom to grow into who we really are, and our ability to feel worthy just by existing. So let's now discuss what we can do, the shift and the awareness, because there is good news. And it's that shame is not who we are, guys. It's a strategy we inherited and a survival mechanism we carried. And it's a pattern that can be softened, It kind of lives in the dark. And the moment it's brought into the light with a bit of compassion, it will begin to lose its grip. And the shift begins by noticing. So like catching when when you silence yourself, or when you apologize automatically, when you feel the urge to perform instead of criticizing, yourself, or criticizing yourself for doing it again, or, pause and recognize this was once my way of surviving. You didn't choose shame as a child, it chose you. And the fact that you can now see it means you already have a different choice. And that is super powerful. And for parents, the shift, I think, is also in awareness. So when you notice shaming language leaving your mouth, resist the spiral of shaming yourself for it. Instead, own it, repair it, and show your kid that mistakes don't mean love goes away. That in itself is healing for them and for you too. Shame dissolves when it's met with compassion and kindness. I see you, I know you're here, and you don't have to run the show anymore. This is how you can talk to yourself. This is the work of reclaiming your authenticity, and not all at once. You can choose moment to moment to moment, choosing to stay with yourself even when the old fear of rejection rises. The truth is, you never had to earn love. You were love from the beginning. And the task now, you don't need to be someone else, but to remember who you were before shame taught you to hide. Imagine what your life could feel like without the weight of all that shame. You could speak freely without rehearsing every word, and rest without guilt, or love without bracing for this constant rejection, and choosing a path not because of other people's values, but because it sings in your bones and it brings you joy. And this is what becomes possible when shame is no longer steering that ship. So when authenticity is allowed to return, letting go of shame doesn't mean you get rid of the past. It means rewriting the present, and it means giving yourself the unconditional love you used to have to earn. And from that place, your work, your relationships, even the way you inhabit your own skin will begin to change. If you want to explore this work further with me, please get in touch. I have a few spots left for weekly sessions, and we can get into the place that beneath that story and get into the body, so you can begin to actually repair rather than spiraling from self-help books, or trying to fix yourself through intellect alone. Please remember, we have my Substack if you want to subscribe to that, and I'm always available to talk if you need to. We've got a human dynamics training coming up, which is teaching the Stark method and the human dynamics, which is my psychological pathway. If you need anything at all, please email me at nikita@nikitastark.co.uk. The link will be in the description. Thank you.